Our water connection acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land throughout Australia and their connection to country, sky, water, and community. We extend our respect to the traditional custodians of the place where you are listening. This episode is recorded in Kaurna Country. What does innovation actually mean in the water sector? And are we doing it right? What would it take to spark a true innovation wave in the water sector? What can we learn from utilities around the world that are leading the way in innovation? Today, we dive into the exciting potential of innovation to solve some of the water sector's biggest challenges. My name is Jess Borges. I am on a mission to increase your water curiosity, and this is our Water Connection. Welcome to this new episode. Today, honestly, is a special one. It is episode 40 of our Water Connection, which is very exciting. And for this episode 40, we actually planned like a cross connection with another water industry podcast. I was honored to be featured in episode 40 of Executive Exchange podcast from IL Utilities. And now I'm very happy and very excited to talk all things innovation with the host of this podcast, Dr. Piers Clark. Dr. Piers Clark is a global leader in water innovation and the founder and former chairman of IL Group, a consultancy company working with over 350 utilities around the world to accelerate the adoption of new technologies. With a career that spanned private equity, leadership roles at Thames Water and other companies, and the creation of the groundbreaking technology approval group, Piers has been at the forefront of connecting brilliant ideas with real-world impact. He brings a powerful mix of technical expertise, global insight, and the entrepreneurial drive to the water sector. Welcome to Water Connection, Piers.
Hey, good to meet you, Jess. Nice to reconnect.
Yeah, nice to see you again. Let's start with the basics. What does innovation mean?
So innovation is one of those words that people bandy about, and it means so many different things. You have often corporations who will say things like, we're innovative. And actually, innovation means we take risk. And if you actually shone a light on that to those corporations that say, we're innovative, and say, oh, so you take risk. When was the last time you failed? When was the last time you did something, it didn't work, and you celebrated that failure? That's, in my mind, the real test of innovation. Because you've kind of got to be open-minded to trying out new stuff and being prepared for it to fail. And it doesn't mean it fails catastrophically. What it means is you learn something from it. You stop, you divert, you shift to a new direction. And so innovation means striving to do things better, but it does mean by doing that, taking risk and trying something different that no one's tried before, or it's the first time you've tried it in your particular organization, or it's the first time you've done it and you don't know the answer. Yeah, that's the innovation bit, is that you don't know whether it's going to work or not. There's no point in saying, eating a new Mars bar is not an innovative thing. Every time I open the wrapper, I know what I'm going to eat.
What is there?
Even if it was the first time I ate a Mars bar, I know that it was going to be a good quality product. The innovation is doing something new, taking a bit of a risk.
I think that's a great example because, it comes really clear in our minds. It's something new, right? Anything new that we do. But I think the part of taking the risk and also learning from failures and knowing that the first time you try something probably is not quite going to work the best way is a really good addition to that part of doing something new. How is innovation different in this sector of water sector in comparison with other industries that maybe you have had experience with?
It's a really interesting one. So I won't name check the utility, but I was sitting in front of a chief executive of a water utility. The chief executive, most senior person, it was someone who had previously been the CFO, which might explain why he had the chief finance officer beforehand. So it was an accountant by training. And he said to me, Piers, I want you to know that we here at so-and-so company are absolutely committed to innovation. But I tell you, not one of our innovations is ever going to fail. And it was this astonishing perspective of someone not getting what innovation is. Now, imagine that you work in that team. Imagine that you work in that utility and you heard your chief executive say, we're going to be innovative, but we're never going to fail. It completely crushes what you do, how you go about doing things. Now, how does innovation differ in the water sector? Your question there is that innovation is absolutely vital to us in the water sector, in that the only way we're going to address the challenges of the climate crisis or PFAS or the phosphorus crisis or sewer overflows or the ever intense droughts. Yeah, the only way we're going to address those is through being innovative in our practices and our procedures and the technologies we adopt. But we don't quite realize it. It's not in our corporate and cultural DNA to recognize that innovation is vital to it in the way that perhaps it is in, say, pharmaceuticals. So if you worked in the pharmaceutical industry, the only way you stay ahead of the competition, the only way of your GSK that you stay ahead of the other drug companies is through innovation and developing
Bringing new
different
things.
types of
Yeah.
drugs. And we don't have that because survival of a utility doesn't depend upon them actually delivering an improved service. You don't go bust because you are a public service. So it becomes
Yeah.
this really interesting dynamic as to how does innovation play, because culturally it's not a vital part of our DNA yet.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point. That is a point of difference with the pharmaceutical that you were saying, where is the drivers are different. And what do you think that we struggle so much in adopting new technologies?
So the thing about the water sector is it is filled with brilliant engineers and scientists, really capable people. Very rarely have I ever come across someone where you go, well, they just don't have the technical capability here. We've got people who are very well trained. They're really committed. People who wake up every day thinking, how can I better serve the communities in which I live? And that's wonderful because it means that we've got people who are bright and love a challenge and they want to delve into new technology. So you often find that new technology is sort of intellectually stimulating. It's something that here's a new idea, a new type of membrane. And gosh, we've got to know about that. And you'll get drawn into lots of meetings and people will talk about it. And then they'll even get into doing trials.
Or
And you
pilots,
find
yeah.
it's something, well, this is wonderful. This is exactly what innovation should be about. Um, but where we fail, I'm afraid to say, is that culturally we're not good at taking the findings of the innovation and then embedding them into business as usual. So we've got lots and lots of technologies. Yeah, I've been in the water sector now 35 years, and I could probably recite 500 companies that have come through, been really exciting technologies, ones that are game changing. They appear to work. People have done trials. And then you get this worst bit where someone does a trial, the trial works, and then the organization that did the trial goes, well, that's wonderful. We've done it now. It's for someone else to
Thank
take
you.
this forward.
Yeah.
And and actually, you kill the technology at that stage because the second trial they go to, someone goes, oh, so you did a trial with so and so utility, and
Hold on.
you
What
say
happened?
that worked. You say it worked, but they didn't buy, so it can't. I don't trust you now. And suddenly you get caught into this spiral of people doing trials, them not getting traction because they didn't quite think about, what was going to happen after the trial. If the trial does X, Y, Z, what are we going to do? Which we think we found possibly a way around, but maybe we'll come to that in a minute. But it's that challenge that makes it so difficult for us.
So it is kind of in the culture, right? But is it because, and this is something I hear a lot in people within the industry, they're quite a risk averse industry. So is it like, this is new and maybe there might be some risk that it doesn't work and maybe that's why let's just revert back to like the technology that we have used for years? Or why is it, what are behind those reasons there of why that this happens?
Yeah, so we're risk averse for very good reasons. We're dealing with people's public health. So
Yes,
I
for
am
sure.
not proposing that we suddenly shift our risk profile because, if in the water sector, if you do something with your water treatment plant and it doesn't work, a lot of people will get
Yes.
quite seriously ill. So we need to be appropriately risk averse. My challenge is that if you're going to do a trial, then you should design the trial to address the risks that are stopping you from adopting the trial. And I think what we get caught in is people will do trials with new technology to test the wrong things. They'll test whether the technology does a particular thing, but they won't
Yeah.
actually question the test of what is needed to address to help me make an investment go or no go decision. So once you've completed the trial, you then get to the investment go no go decision to are we going to invest in it? And you find that there's a whole army of other people in the organization who raise a lot of other issues that weren't addressed in the
Mm.
trial, hence it doesn't get adopted. And so I think a lot of the problem is that people don't do enough consultation internally before they do a trial to understand all of the questions that need to be answered, and then converting those questions, and some of them will be
Into
relevant
your
and some of them
trial.
won't be relevant, converting those into suitable KPIs that you then test during the trial so that when you complete the trial, people are able to say with confidence, yes, we know this works. If you've done a trial and at the end of it, there are still people saying, well, I don't think it's going to work, then you've wasted everybody's time and effort doing the
Mm.
trial because you didn't do the exam question, is my
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good position, maybe, especially in utilities that might be really big. And you might have a technology, you mentioned membrane, so in the treatment, right? And you might be in contact with some of the people in the process engineering side of things, but there will be so many other angles of the company that need to be involved from the beginning. And people are like just running through just having a lot of things to do, for example, but don't really take the time to take that testing and like really broaden it out in the organization.
Yeah, well, you've got to talk to health and safety, you've got to talk to asset standards, you've got to talk to the operations guys, you've got to talk to the technical team. Yeah, you've got to talk to the finance people. You've got to check that the company you're dealing with is actually sort of would work on your procurement scheme. Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
There's a whole raft of questions that need to be addressed, and actually, I really think that if you don't address those before you do a trial, you're not being fair to yourself. You're not being fair to the tech company that you're doing the
Mm.
trial with because you're sort of wasting everybody's time and effort. And of course,
Time.
it is worth
Yeah.
keeping in mind that if you're a tech company, you don't have endless resources. You've probably only got enough resources to do a finite number of trials. So every trial you do is sucking up resources, be that time, cash, equipment, whatever. That means that if that doesn't convert into something meaningful afterwards, that company is heading on a route to failure.
Yeah, it's the difference between continuing or having to stop for sure.
Yeah.
But then what happens if from the company they're like saying, "Oh, but why would we talk to everyone around the business if we need to know if it works technically?" Or like something along those lines, which I don't know if it works like that, but like counteractive that argument that could say, let's try something very small and then let's find out what other things can we do around the business to bring everyone in the picture. Is that what normally happens? That tend to happen and that's why it doesn't quite work? Or
So people do different things. And of course, it does depend on what TRL, what technology readiness level a tech
yeah,
company is at.
the
So
technologies. Yeah.
just for the audience's sake, there's a scale called TRLs, technology readiness levels, that go from 0 to 9, 9 being technology that is fully fledged. Now, of course, if you're talking to a technology company that's, say, a TRL 3, then they're very early stage. You're not going to do a test with them and then suddenly buy the technology. Of course, you're not.
Yeah.
You're merely trying to move them up the TRL scale. So there might be, you're doing a lab scale test, and if that goes well, then it'll go to a pilot plant and it will have moved from TRL 3 to TRL 4, for example. Once you get to TRL technologies that are 8 or 9, then actually the technical questions should have been answered. So the technical issue of does this new type of membrane actually work should be resolved. Now you're down to questions which are very specific to your site, or your particular asset standards, or how they retrofit to your type of water, or all of those sorts of questions come in,
More
which should
details, all the
be
things. Yeah.
really easy to sort of put an envelope around and say, right, this is what we're testing. And so it depends. The answer to your
Yeah.
question depends a little bit on where they are on the
On where.
TRL scale. Um,
Yeah.
but when I talk about my frustration is you get lots of companies that get to TRL 8 or 9, and that's when they die. And they thought that's the point when they thought, hey, we're there,
We've
we've done
got
it.
this.
We're spun out from a university. We've done all our trials and our technology stuff to prove it. We've got our patents. We've secured our funding. And there's lots of investors who have come
Yeah.
into the water sector, backing companies thinking, well, this thing's going to solve the water crisis. And they back the companies. And then they find this moment of frustration that they've backed a technology company that through their due diligence they believe is good, and then the company doesn't get traction with the utilities at a quick enough scale, and so those investors then leave the sector and never return. They never
Yeah.
return because they've been burnt.
That's very interesting. Before I go into some of the other questions I have, what is the role that utilities has in this kind of ecosystem? Do you connect kind of the technologies and the new companies that are growing with the utilities? Is that kind of what your role is in all this?
So the strapline we use is that we're an independent technical consultancy that helps utilities identify and adopt new technology. So we're independent.
Mm.
We aren't peddling any particular type of technology. We screened something like 15,000 technologies over the last 10 years or so, and we work for the utilities mostly to help them find the sorts of solutions that might address their problems, and then helping those utilities work out whether has this technology been tested in a different country, what was the results from that, how does this work, helping them run some trials. So it's all about trying to assist in the problems that we just described of having some incredibly competent and technical people in the utilities. But the problem is, if you work in a particular utility, if I work in DC Water in Washington, then my world is probably relatively small. It is around what's going on in DC Water. I probably don't
Yeah.
know what's going on in Victoria, Australia, or
Oh,
in
for sure.
London, UK. And so being able to understand where technologies have been trialed, how those results went, it's providing that insight.
Yeah, it's providing that and connected now. No, I think that's really interesting. And of course, working with hundreds of utilities around the world, what have you seen that separates those that really nail it and apply innovation successfully and those who don't? You don't need to name anyone.
No, well, it's a good question, but it's not one that's that black and white, actually, because it would be wonderful if you said, "Now, here's the list of naughty utilities that don't do it well, and here's the." It doesn't work like that because it often comes down to individuals you're talking to and their responsibilities within the power they have
Yes.
within their particular organizations. It does the biggest influence, not surprisingly, is down to the leadership of that utility. So if you've got a leader who understands and values the importance of innovation within their organizations. By understands, I mean understands that it means that sometimes things are going to fail
Fail.
and isn't going to chastise their staff for learning from things, and appreciates that innovation is an important part of what they're going to do. Because some utilities, innovation isn't appropriate. They've got so many other issues they've got to deal with. They've got to get costs under control, or there's other things. So they've got to understand the process of innovation, what you've got to test, how you build up confidence in it, and then how you embed that into your organization. So the best organizations are those which have got leaders that understand that process.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And flipping it a little bit from like companies that succeed or not, what do you think Australia can learn from countries and other utilities around the world in the way of applying innovation in our sector?
So it's really it's dangerous to make sweeping generalizations, which I'm about to make. So I caveat what I'm about to say with some
There's a
sweeping general.
caveat, yes.
Uh, but so back in the 1990s, when I was starting in my career in the water sector, what we tended to think of was that Australia was was a little bit behind Europe, and you'd find yourself doing things would happen in Europe, and then or North America, and Australia would sort of be playing a bit of catch up. We saw in all sorts of things like asset management, for example.
Yeah.
What we've now seen is that Australia has sort of leapfrogged, and I think part of that is because Australia has it does have a very can-do, pioneering sort of attitude, just generally, and with the shift of what's happened with technology and communication over the last 30 years, information flows instantly around the world. And so Australia is a leader on a lot of what happens on innovation. You could say that that's because there's some utilities that are perfectly sized in Australia. They're not too big or too small.
Too small.
They're not so small they haven't got the complex issues, yet they're also not so unwieldy as some of the bigger utilities are, where you just can't mobilize them to do things. So there might be something around structure. There might be something around regulatory style that's encouraged some innovation. Yeah, but Australia is, in my opinion, one of the faster to adopt and engage on innovation than we see in other parts of the world. Americans are really interesting because Americans think that they're the best, and sometimes they are. But there's also an element of, forgive me, but bullshit that comes out. I've read some statements where a US utility quite proudly stated that they were the first in the world to adopt thermal hydrolysis. And the confidence with which they stated this clearly led them to believe that they were. The
Must be
fact that
true.
this technology had been being used for 20 years around the world, you find yourself looking at it thinking, you couldn't be this bold in your sort of statement of belief. Um,
Yeah. I think it could be, as you say, like a cultural kind of thing. Because yeah, when you say like Americans, yeah, they're very good at some stuff, but they also, yeah, think they are the center of the world, and they are for some certain things, but not for other
I
ones. But
think
no,
we all think that where we are is the center of the world. I think that's the
probably,
sort of.
probably. Yeah, that is probably for all of us. But no, it's really good to learn that really we as a sector in Australia have like become a leaders in these things, and like, and sometimes that's to be recognized as well, because if you're in an organization, and like maybe in your day to day you don't get exposed to these things, but knowing that at a national level we have really good examples of how to adopt new technologies and everything is something to be proud of. I was going to ask you something. You did mention it briefly in your last answer. And it was the role of regulators, because I would imagine in different parts of the world, that would be pretty different in how it enables companies to do like new trial new things. So how do you think regulators play a part in supporting and accelerating innovation?
So again, it would be lovely to be able to give you a simple answer, but this is a complex issue with how the regulator interfaces with the utility. Clearly, it is not the regulator's job to drive innovation in the sector. Equally, it's not helpful if they constrain utilities so much that they can't be innovative. So you've got this, for a regulator, it's a very difficult tightrope to walk. On one level, they should set the rules, be clear with the rules of how the utility should be delivering, and then give the utility some freedom to exercise, to drive out performance through innovation. What that sometimes requires, of course, is the regulator understanding that there's some risk involved in adopting this new approach, this new technology, and therefore we're going to put in place a variable consent or something like that. If you're trying something new on treating wastewater, for example, it's a game change technology, you need to engage with your regulator to make sure they're on the journey with you, and that if it fails, the utility that took the risk in doing it, they weren't playing fast and loose. They were engaging with the utility to try and do the best thing. And if it doesn't work, what you need to make sure is that utility is not unfairly chastised for doing that
Yeah.
by its regulator, because otherwise no one's ever going to try things. So they've got that interesting balance to go through. What we've seen in recent years is the regulators now stepping in to encourage more investment in innovation. And that we've seen in various heavily regulated infrastructure sectors. So, jumping out of water for a moment, the electrical distribution network sector in the
Yeah.
UK, essentially innovation died in that sector because there was no incentive for any of the utilities to do innovation. So they
Yeah.
killed off their R&D departments. There was no budgets to do it. You got into this cycle of a negative cycle where there's no money to do it. There's no people employed to do it. So we're not going to do it. We don't need it. And the industry basically started going stagnant. And of course, what was
Yeah.
happening was new things were coming in. People were building solar panels on their houses and micro wind farms. And so suddenly the network wasn't didn't have the technical innovation to be able to adapt to the changing landscape of energy generation. So the way the regulator Ofgem in the UK did it was they created a platform for enabling the DNOs, the utilities that were operating there, to have budgets that they were dedicated to innovation. And that model proved to be very good. It
Kind
reignited
of
the
restarted it.
innovation
Yeah.
framework. And we've started to see that happening in the water sector with some great success, actually. It means that there is money being spent. I do worry that we haven't quite resolved the cultural issue. That point. So there's lots of people doing lots of clever things. Is it actually resulting in a change in business as usual of people adopting new technologies? And the question to ask yourself, if anyone's listening to this, is think back over the last 5 years, how many new things have been adopted in your utility that weren't there 5 years ago? How many new technologies are now embedded in and are part of the day-to-day process that didn't exist 10 years ago?
That's a really good reflection. So yeah, for whoever is listening, then think about that and just reflecting on like our position in this innovation space. This episode is proudly supported by the Chris Davies AM Fellowship, an initiative of the Australian Water Association. His legacy lives on through this fellowship, empowering efforts to keep his passion for innovation and community impact alive. We're honored to have the support of this fellowship this season too, as we continue to share stories that connect us all to water. Now, back to the episode. Piers, how would you explain your work to your friend who knows nothing about the water sector?
How do I explain my work? Well, actually, I had to give a talk earlier this week to some 14-year-olds at a local school. It was a careers talk on that. And they said, "So what do you do?" Because I said, "Look, I was explaining what we do in Isle." And it's funny to say, look, we don't make anything. 14-year-olds, they tend to think, you're either doing an airline pilot or a waiter or something, or you're making something in a factory. And the idea that there was that you're an advisor providing consultative technical advice to help utilities make better informed decisions was quite a leap for some of the 14-year-olds. What was really interesting was you could see that there was a bunch of them going, "Wow, I never thought of that. This is why I want to be top of the class," sort of thing. They wanted to be the nerds because this is where they could suddenly see that they didn't need to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
practical and be able to make something with their hands. They could be a specialist. But that's what I'd say my work is. We try and help water utilities make better decisions so that they can serve their communities even better than they do now.
Nice, nice. And happy coincidence. I was at a school this morning as well, talking about our careers in water and like doing some games and things to attract people into our industry. So hopefully we between the two of us, we at least convince one or two to join us in the future. Piers, what would be your message to young water professionals, people starting their careers in this sector who might be listening to you right now?
So the message is you're going to have to work harder than anyone has ever worked in the water sector ever, because we've got more problems than we have ever faced. So when I joined the water sector in 1992, we were facing the cessation of dumping of sludge at sea. It felt like this impossible thing that we were dealing with. There was some legislation coming in 1998, so we were 6 years away from it, and so much effort was being put into what could we do to solve this problem. And I remember at the time, we'd have meetings where people would be rubbing their hands and going, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" And of course, you got through it. The problems we face now, whether that's PFAS or microplastics or CSOs or the climate crisis with the extremes of droughts and bushfires and going to hideous floods, those sorts of problems require a level of resilience, a level of decision making, and confidence. People need to be able to move within organizations with confidence that they can make decisions and move forward. It might not be the right decision, but it's better to make a decision and learn something from it than carry on doing something and sort of living in denial, fingers in ears. "Oh, well, it's worked fine for the last 20 years. It'll be fine for another 20 years. I just need to sit over this and hold my watch while I'm here." Unfortunately for the next
That's not gonna work.
generation, that's not going to work.
No, no. Thank
So
you. That's
resilience. My advice to people is be resilient, be confident, be righteously angry. I think there is something about righteous anger is a really useful thing. When you see people being profligate with water during the middle of a drought, let that be something that annoys you and spurs you on to make your water efficiency campaign just that little bit more
That's
compelling.
right.
Something like that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And to wrap up, is why do you work in the water sector?
So I joined the water sector because I was 17, 18. I was at university and I was sitting in a civil engineering lecture, and the message came out that 30,000 people a day die of public health diseases that could be cured through better public through diseases that could be cured through better public health. And that fact spurred me. I wrote a diary, and it's written in my diary of I now know what I'm going to do. I'm going to work in the water sector. So it was a very sort of road to Damascus type moment for me. Of suddenly I had clarity of okay, this is what I'll do.
This is it.
I find myself 35 years on, and there's still that same number of people a day die of diseases that could be cured through better public health. And so, on one level, I've spent a career not addressing the very problem that spurred me to come into the industry. So you should have done better. Would be the
But
conclusion, right?
like, I'm pretty sure you have been involved in many fantastic initiatives as well. And I think part of it is inspiring the next generation of people that we're going to be working into this, that in a way we do what we can in our roles, and we try to get more people interested in this sector with your some of your projects and this project as well. So it's yeah, very very touching to learn kind of the reason that you're doing it. And but don't let that discount, because I'm pretty sure you have been involved in wonderful things. Piers, thank you very much for your time today. I think this was a wonderful, really high level overview of innovation. Is like a really high level discussion, because there's so many intricacies and things that are different in different geographies, in different water utilities, in different aspects of like how you try new technologies. But it was really good to understand some of the basics of like what could be some of the obstacles and some of the opportunities as well that we have. So thank you very much for joining us today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
That's it for today on our Water Connection, episode 40. Thank you very much for listening and being part of this community. Remember that your voice matters to us, and you can leave some feedback by clicking on the link, send us a message, and share this around your colleagues if you're listening to. Think about that question that Piers put out there of like, how many new things in your company, if you work in a utility or in the sector, are new that were not 5 years ago? Maybe apart from ChatGPT, because that's kind of anywhere. But like, no, think about things that are like in our sector, and what can we do to really shift the dollar up of like trying new things and not be afraid to fail, because that's the way to learn. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform and social media for any updates and highlights. Keep that curiosity flowing, and I'll see you next time.